when you believe in something, if you put your heart into a movie, if you're really vulnerable with it and you try stuff and you experiment, it's going to have your back. It's going to help you make a good thing.
Welcome to You're Not Gonna Make It. My name is Nico Casavecchia. I'm a writer and director from Argentina based here in LA. And You're Not Gonna Make It is a podcast about surviving our career expectations, where I sit down with successful people, but to debunk their seemingly perfect professional lives in a quest to find out what making it really means for them and for me. And today's guest is Omer Ben-Shachar. Is a Los Angeles-based screenwriter and director. He's also a friend. His short 3 No. 3 won a 2019 Student Academy Award. Omer this year was part of the Screenwriters Independent Screenwriter Lab. He's also a Project Involved Directing Fellow. And it keeps going, honestly. I could be here for 3 hours listing his accomplishments. And this is the thing. When I met Omer, I met him out of context. So I hung out with him in LA many times before I actually Google him. But I already knew he was talented on top of being humble. And if you're so accomplished, at least be an asshole, right? So we can hate you. Well, we can hate him. He's a very, very nice guy on top of being talented. And I would frame Omer's films in what I consider is a new wave of magic realism coming from the independent American cinema. And I see this especially in the film festival circuit. So I'm very excited to have him here. And if you haven't seen his work, go check it out because he's amazing. Okay, so without further ado, this is my conversation with Omer Ben-Shachar. Hi, Omer. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm excited to, we never got to talk about directing this way.
I think that we met at the directing actors workshop, right? And I was just saying in the intro that I was so excited to see your work because we hung out many times before I actually got to know what happens in that workshop is that sometimes you get to hang out and then you're not completely aware of what other people are doing or what their work is like. And I saw you directing actors in such a thoughtful way that the place I put you in my mind was like, okay, this very, thoughtful independent director that works, a Casavecchia, like someone who's all about directing actors. And then when I saw your work, I saw this visual world that you bring to your films that it incorporates that acting element that is so strong, but also has this amazing visual side to it. So they were super surprised by that. And I guess that's a good way to start. Just tell me a little bit about that. Well, it's also funny. How do you think about it?
I had the reverse thing because we met at this director's workshop. I've never seen your work, which was kind of, if we ever do it again, we would change the order. But, we just gave each other feedback on our directing. And that's how we met, like just critiquing each other's work. And then, live work. Yeah. And then later, just months later, I was like, wow, he knows so much more than I do. How dare I give him notes on his directing?
I don't agree, but
so funny.
Did you hate me when you met me? Do I come across as very obnoxious?
No, of course not. I just felt like it's a weird, usually you see people's work, a complete work, right? And here in this workshop, we saw how we actually work on set, not the final product, not the vision of the director, not the script you wrote, just like a snippet of who you are.
But there is a beauty on not having context about someone you meet that I feel it's so unlike LA, because in LA everybody meets someone else because of the context they think the other people is in. No,
that's true. I mean, we can make this into a reality show, maybe. Like meet at a interesting angle and then later actually find out who the person is.
I love that in the moment of the biggest decline in reality TV, we are the future of the reality TV business. I don't know if we're material for that, but I hope we are. I wanted to ask you about there's a film you did, 3 No. 3. That's the way you pronounce it because it's 3 number symbol.
3 No. 3. 3 No. 3. Yeah, it's like based on the role the kid gets in the school play.
I love the film. And
Thank you.
it almost feels like your own origin story. It almost feels like something that happened and that you were portraying it from your own experience. I want to know more about that. And how did you did that film?
It is, and it's also like the base of my, artistic path, which is interesting because I was, when you told me what this podcast was about and how you said like celebrating the low moments of your career, I was trying to think last night, what were some of the low moments? And I thought, this is kind of backtracking on your question. It's just talking about this concept of low moments, but really that's like the source of all, at least for me, all my work. It's like I always look at those. Oh, you want to say something?
No, I wanted to ask you if you could give some context about the film for people who haven't seen it, because I think it's tell us the story of the film.
Tree number 3, based on my life, but it's an immigrant kid who's cast as a background tree in his school play because of his accent. But he sees himself as the lead actor, which is what he is. And so he basically tries to take over the show with the other two trees. And it's very autobiographical, except for the end. So I was cast as tree number 3 because of my accent, but I never took over the show. But making this film was, I know it sounds like kind of cheesy, but it's true. Making this film was my way to expand that role. And the last line of the film is, "A tree isn't just a tree," and
which fits perfectly on the theme you were alluding before, because it feels like a very low moment to be cast as tree number 3.
Exactly. So back to the low moment conversation. Also, I'll give you a little bit of context into how I maybe even started filmmaking. And I'm trying to organize this, but and also I saw y'all's episode and we have a similar story. But I also, in middle school, I was I went through a big relocation and I was getting into a new school, wanted to be an actor in the theater department, and they said, "We don't have room, but you can try the film department in the basement of the school." That's where it was, in the basement. And it's like, okay, I'll try it, but I wasn't very excited about it. And I was like hoping that maybe I could transition back to acting later. But at the same time, there was another thing that happened, which is we shipped all our stuff in boxes, but except for the most important, precious stuff, which we took with us, me and my sister, each one of us had one suitcase we filled with our most precious stuff. And I'm kind of a collector, like I'm really connected to my stuff. And the suitcase got lost. And I was so devastated. It was already a confusing time.
How old were you?
Exactly. I was like 13. And even if it would happen today, I would be devastated. But at the time, all I had was my stuff. I moved to a new country. I didn't have any friends. And then all my stuff were lost. And I didn't know how to overcome it. And at the same time, the film instructor that I met, he was saying, how do you come up with a film idea? And his approach was, write the 3 things that keep you up at night and write about those. And of course, the suitcase was the first thing I wrote about at the time. And I made a movie about it. And, again, sounds cheesy, but it's true. It was the only thing that cured my, the feelings I had about if only I could get the suitcase back, because I was creating a new memory, right? I was creating something new, and I did something with that low moment. And since then, that is really my approach to filmmaking. I have if I have a bad day, I make it into a movie, or if I have, and then even past low moments. So tree number 3 was a huge low moment in my life, and I was able to kind of explore it, in another light. And also, and we can talk about this more later, but I feel like low moments, even in the creative process, for example, this short I just did, we had a huge sandstorm in the middle, which was like, made it so much more difficult. But
of course,
probably not.
Sandstorm is exactly what happens when you try to film something. It's the most unusual things happen when you're trying to film anything.
Exactly. But you won't be surprised if I tell you that the best shots are, the windstorm shots, So I
And
think, yeah, go ahead.
I think we talked about this on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling you like how much would it be just to get a sandstorm on camera? How much would you imagine? Would you dare approaching a producer and say like, you know what we think that we need for this is actually a sandstorm. If you could make it happen, that would mean giant fans and like
Exactly.
and like permits. It's impossible.
And we did actually want wind because it's like on Mars, it's a distant planet, but not that much wind. I would never ask for it again, but but it created a great shot. So low points and filmmaking, in my opinion, it's like combined. It's and also even if you look at storytelling, like when we connect with characters, we connect to their low points, right? When you watch a movie and you're like, ugh, I feel so much for this character. It's when they are struggling with something unexpected. It's not when they're winning the Oscar, So
I want to ask you about the Oscar because, of course, this is a little bit of a legend about you. You do 3 number 3 and you get a Student Academy Award. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And you know how they say that actually early success builds ego and late success builds character. And it seems with you that you have your cake and eat it too, because you have both. I feel like you're a person who's very grounded and at the same time had this enormous dopamine hit that means to win an Oscar as a student. How did you manage not to be an asshole after that?
I mean, success in my mind, I don't know about ego, but about in the creative process, I do think it's very dangerous because especially early on, because, we're just crap, like our voices are evolving. But then when something, and it's not necessarily the Student Academy Award, but it's that so many people responded to the film in a certain way, which, is the biggest gift of a filmmaker. I'm so grateful. And it's like, the movie works so well to any kind, so many people connect to it for different reasons. It's not just actors who are cast as tree number 3, even though there's a lot of people who are cast as a tree that have come up to me after and, share their experience.
I love that's my favorite part.
I know it's
the
a
fact
big
that people
thing,
get to you and they have shared that experience, and that's the beauty of especially shorts. I feel like people are very open about short films. When they're actually an audience of a short film, they're a little bit more open. Except in Letterboxd. In Letterboxd, they kill you as you were actually kind of like deserving of punishment.
Well, it's not in person, but yeah, in person they come up to you, with their stories. But what was I gonna say? But at the same time, you do have to fight, like, because we want to keep creating new stuff. Like, we want to make sure we're not stuck in the same, like, okay, this is what worked, this is what we're going to do again. Because I don't know, I do think with filmmaking, the magic is nobody knows anything. You have no idea if a movie's gonna, based on a script, how the movie is going to turn out. And you just have to have,
I want to ask you about that because I want to know the process of like, you finish this film and this is a thesis film, right?
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about the feelings that go through the process of finishing it, releasing it, and knowing about the nomination and the award. Before we go into the lows, I want to establish this because I think it's a very interesting, I'm fascinated by that, the actual emotions that go through you when you're faced with this kind of response from your work. Walk me through the path of that, but just focus on the feelings. How does it feel to finish and to start getting it out, your expectations, initial responses?
But the truth is, I think the reason it's hard for me to answer is I don't, and this is probably a flaw, but I don't really pause to feel those kind of stuff. When I'm showing a new thing, I'm always either how can we fix it or what's the next thing.
Okay.
So when that was happening, I was probably focused more on my future and, what could this become and, moving forward. So I don't remember any. I mean, the bigger celebration was when we screened it way before the Student Academy at the, at the AFI, to all the people who worked on it. And that was the first time that I saw people reacting to it in an audience. And I was super moved. And that was when I could kind of pause and be in the moment, be present, and appreciate, what we've accomplished. But it was way before the student. It was when I, because I didn't know if the movie was working or not until that point. And
How fascinating
we
is
actually,
that, right?
crazy. And even more fascinating is there was moments where it didn't work at all before. Like our first cut, when we at AFI, you screened it in different classes, and we screened it in the editing class. And the teacher is a villain, and still she's the villain of the movie. But at the first screening, it's like she took all the attention. Nobody could focus on the kid because she was just so evil, and it felt very unrealistic. And people were not connecting with the movie. They weren't connecting with Itai. And I was like, man, we're doomed. Like, this is in the
Did you make a
script. We
survey?
can't fix
People
it.
came to you. How do you find out that, like, the perception that
Yes.
people are
Well,
having about a film?
the editing class specifically was only 20 people. And then the week after, we did a full preview screening of 100 people, and they did the survey. We can get into this soon, but I'm obsessed with test screenings. I know a lot of filmmakers like really don't like it, but there's a science to it, and there's a magic to it. Like you start seeing patterns. Like it's not about this one person's note, like I don't like this, I don't like that, but it's more like the collective feeling, what they like, what they don't like. You can really like, it's so clear when you get a group of people what's working and what's not, to a certain
I
sense.
think the big difference between liking or not liking that kind of exposing your work to audiences early on is if you have the final cut or not. Because I feel some filmmakers hate it because they know that a bunch of people will define a project they've been working on for years, and they don't. I mean, they spend 40 minutes with the movie, an hour and a half. They made their judgment, and you spent 3 years with your movie. But then if you have the ability to take that on your own terms and use it, that's great. But if you don't have like the ability to do that, and then suddenly like the fate of a project is defined by a bunch of people who spent an hour and a half with it, that's a different story.
Well, here's the thing though. In my mind, it's like you spent 3 years on something. You might as well get the notes now so you can fix it before you screen it. It's like, for me, it's like another protective layer. But it also comes down to, this is a thing I'd love to talk to you about too. Like, you can fix so much in editing in the most unexpected ways. Like, it's not, so even if a character is really unlikable, you can keep all the same lines and make them so much more likable just by trimming 3 seconds there, adding a cough in the audio, adding this sound, maybe actually extending, versus like often like our instinct is like, let's shorten, the disliked characters. But actually, if you extend it just a little bit, you see like a small moment of vulnerability, or you cut, right on their breath and it gets interrupted. Suddenly we feel like, oh, they're always getting interrupted. So you can fix so much. So once you, I think, have the confidence in that, I think test screenings can be really helpful because, you can fix everything. You really can fix. Did you ever watch The Martian?
Yes, I did.
I just rewatched it last week. It just really reminded me of filmmaking. Like, he starts out there saying, I'm not going to survive. I have food for a month. I have to be here 4 years. I don't even have a way to contact NASA. And then, the scene after, he's like, wait, I'm not going to die here. I'm going to make this work. And then problem by problem, he does the impossible and fixes it.
I'm curious to see how you deal with that first cut emotions, because I think that's, to me, the lowest point of any project I do. And it doesn't get better with age. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years. And every time I see a cut, I'm like, I'm fucked. I'm just fucked. Like, this was all a mistake. I'm not good at this. And slowly I get into the groove of like, very depressed, go to sleep. The next day I wake up, take a shower, and start doing following the steps of the process you're describing, and getting myself out of that hole, digging myself out. from a hole that
Exactly.
I felt that it was impossible to get out. So I want to know, how do you deal with the first cut that an editor does? Probably a very good editor shows you this cut and you see it and you have to face the first iteration of this thing.
Yeah, and sometimes I actually edit the projects myself. Sometimes not, but it either or. It's a terrible. It's just so hard talking about low moments again. Like I think I think you just have to investigate, right? Like so, it's like take a break, figure out what the real low. Figure out what the. But I mean, first of all, yes, I relate so much to it because it's such a unexplainable feeling where it's like you have all this, you spent so much time, you had all these fantasies, you did more than your best, like you were on set, your soul was up for offer, like you worked so much, and then it's not good. Like how is that possible? It doesn't make any sense. But you just, yeah, you solve problem by problem. And but I think that the first thing I do is then investigate, like what's kind of rate the problems, like what's the biggest problem, then what's the second, and then just kind of attack each one, like really be fearless about, I can fix this problem, even if I think it's impossible, even if I went over all the takes and all the takes are bad, there's a way to fix this problem. I just don't know yet. It's often, and I have learned this too, like, and we talked about this, it's not like the simple solution, like let's just replace a take. It's usually more about, but it doesn't mean you have to cut it too. It's sometimes just about reorganizing or finding like a way to get into it.
To
then
me,
you
I
fix
think
it. But
there is a platonic ideal we have about our film. Like this is the fantasy that we play in our heads, and it's an abstraction. And then you bring it down to reality, and it starts suffering from the same problems that any element object in reality has, which is like its finitude, its imperfection, and then until you don't love the reality of it, until you don't love the imperfect thing, and then you start thinking,
yes,
what this imperfect thing can be, the movie is not born. Because you gotta mourn the fantasy you had and then bury it and say, all right, like you gotta part ways with that fantasy. And until that happens, you don't get to actually see the potential of what you have in front of you. I mean, to me, that
tell me if you feel this too, but like if you put your heart into a movie, like if you're really vulnerable with it and you try stuff and you experiment, it's going to have your back in a way. Like it's going to help you make a good thing. Like if you really, and when you believe in something, which is usually when you're trying something you've never tried before and you're doing something, then like the movie will kind of help you make it come to life.
yes.
So versus like, doing something that, good enough or you think people might like, and then the movie's not going to respond to that. It's just going to be like, okay, you're not treating me with full respect, so I'm not going to help you back. But
I'm curious to see how do you, because we're taping this in July 24 in the midst of like a very dire moment. It feels like everybody is down in LA. Everybody feels like the industry's over, that we're never going to make movies anymore, that people almost feels like people moved on from the things we love. It feels like people, I mean, to me, it does feels like people have like moved on from features and films and they're into other things now. And how do you deal with that moment, this moment in I would say in our city? I want to bring it back to feelings, and I want to bring it back to relationships more than industry. I'm not so interested in the industry take, but also how do you deal with the feelings that we receive and when we meet each other, when we're talking? These are very special times to be here.
I think just to keep creating. I mean, to be honest, I'm not really focused on that right now because I am focused on this new short that I'm doing, which is taking up all my time. And then there's another feature script that I just did the Film Independent Screenwriting Lab with that I want to fix quickly for another deadline. So I'm just focused on the work. I don't really get into that too much. I also have a question for you about your previous question. So I know you're turning your movie that also, got a lot of success into a feature. How do you deal with finding your new voice within that? Because you created the short probably a year ago, and B, like the things that worked, are you trying to like duplicate them in the feature? Are you trying, because it's another kind of, I feel like when you try and do that, it's another kind of, you're not trying to please the commercial audience, but you're trying to please something that worked in the past, and it's, how much is it dictating your new?
I honestly think that the voice of an artist can only be found in connecting the dots backward. I don't think that you can find your voice by other means than creating things and looking forward things that excite you. And then when you look back, you start seeing patterns that connect those elements together. So you start understanding at least for me, works in a way that I understand myself through making things and then looking back at them, especially because my interests are so wide and so hard to explain to people in the film industry in the US, because they really want to pigeonhole you into a box, and understandably so. They need to create movies. Movies are expensive. They need to know what they're getting. Like when you try to fit like a very artistic impulse into an industry, it becomes kind of like putting a round peg on a square hole.
Right.
And so what I do is try to focus on the next thing. Having said that, in terms of the adaptation of the film, now there's a difference, because like one thing is just to create something, and when I'm creating something new, I'm trying to free myself from my own preconceptions of who I am and what is my place, and try to do something that excites me, feel if I have connection threads. Now, when I'm adapting something, when I'm creating something that will be based on something else I've done, I think that is valuable to try to see, okay, what is the essence of the short in this case? So you're mentioning Border Hopper is a short, premiere at Sundance. It has a very particular way of going about it because it's a mixed media short. It has animation and live action in it. It has some visual themes. They have some conceptual themes. I'm trying to see, all right, what's the best thing we can do with this now that it's going to be a feature? And I think, and I've done this before with other shorts, and I think the most important thing is not to be bounded by exactly the same things that work on a short, and instead see, all right, what is this one to be? And how can we still use the short as a proof of concept? So if people see the short, there's something they can learn from what the expectations of what the film would look like or how it will feel, but not be completely trapped in trying to create a feature adaptation of a short. Mainly because I think a good short and a good feature are completely different things. And the same way that shorts trying to be features fail, you can expand and extend a premise of a short into a feature, and that's not going to be great. Like, it's just going to fall flat. It's going to feel like you're fluffing some conflict that is not good enough for a feature. So we're kind of like going back to I speak in plural because I'm writing with Mercedes, my wife, and my co-writer. Like, we're trying to see, all right, what is the best thing that this one can be, and what is it that he wants to be?
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that one of the best things about filmmaking is that, the movie has a life of its own, but it like tells you, you come into this thinking something about your film, and you get to the end and you're like, whoa, I don't know where this came from, but the movie's so different than what I thought it was. And then you go backwards in terms of like, okay, now the movie's told me something, like it's given me a clue. Now I have to redo it. And then it gives you another clue, and just the whole time. And then it gives you a sandstorm on set. And then in the editing, it gives you something else. Like it isn't alive, and it's bigger than you. I love that
what you're describing feels like that. It feels like, all right, it's not going to be a take. It's not going to be a shot that is different. It has to be the solution that makes this thing better as it is, as it exists, not as I want it to be, right?
I love that you said that. And last week I was like rewatching some movies I love for this new project I'm doing, and I realized like the imperfections are also the magic, right? Like they are filmmaking at its best. In fact, if you try and get rid of all the imperfections and you have like this super clean movie, it's not as relatable and it's not as truthful to life. Like there is the soul lives in those imperfect moments. So I think you try and improve what you can, but you're not trying to create a perfect. You're not trying to get rid of the imperfections.
I want to ask you something about choosing projects and navigating LA. We both live in LA. You're a person that is always creating something new. And I think that's one of the things I love about your work is that it has an urgency. You're always doing something. How do you balance playing the game, pitching movies, trying to get your break into feature films while at the same time you manage to stay creative and actually execute on things that are within your control as opposed to things that you're pitching around town?
Well, it's really hard with writing where it's like, how do you get rid of the voice of what people want to see or what people, whether it's what's commercial or what people, and then what do you want to do? And, the movies I like often I do want to make a connection with the audience. So I'm not dismissing it completely. Like I want to make a movie that people, if it's a comedy that people laugh and connect to, or if it's a rom-com that they're invested in these two lovers, or, they want, I do care about making that connection, but at the same time, like we said, about Nobody Knows Anything, like you can't base your creative process on what's worked in the past, or, even what's worked for you in the past. So how do you deal with that? Because I'm still figuring out like how to listen to my voice and at the same time, take in what.
I wish I was not such a gradualist and I would be bolder as a person and say like, no, I'm going to throw myself into the pit of whatever I want to create. The truth is I try to find a balance between things that I feel are like a little bit safer, where I'm more collaborative with people, my reps, and try to listen to them and understand, okay, how can I adapt my thinking and the things I'm passionate for something that can actually be viable. I would put that in one bucket. And in the other bucket, I would put the things that I feel I want to take swings at and risks. And I don't care so much if either they succeed or fail, which are, I think, shorter form things. One thing I'm always trying to think about is what is it within my power that I can actually execute on? Because I think that this town can like take your soul if you are just endlessly pitching something and you never get to be a director, you never get to be an artist, and you never get to execute. And so I'm always trying to have something that is only going to happen or not, depending on me and my friends or my collaborators. And it doesn't require external funding. It doesn't require validation. And those are the places I think where you can take the most risk. Having said that, I feel like we're suffering more and more pressure to get to places with everything we do. And that's, I think, an unhealthy pressure. Like if you don't have, and this is, I'm telling this to myself, if you don't have a place where you can actually be, wild and fail and allow yourself to not be successful or not speculative about like, what is he going to get? I think that turns into a very dangerous place where your creativity can be stifled, if that makes sense.
Totally. And also, I feel like I think the reason I believe in like risk taking is
curious about your process, because your work, it has always kind of like a visual device to me that is very interesting. Not all your work, but most of it has a very imaginative visual device, right? Like I'm thinking of, let me think, like Down Here, the music video has masks that are amazing. And I, coming from a visual background myself, I know how sophisticated that approach was in terms of like, people can go and watch this. It's amazing. And it's people with masks, but the masks themselves are a work of art. Like they're very specific. I can dwell into it, but I wouldn't be doing it a favor. if I describe this visually, but I want to ask you, do you start with a visual concept? Do you start with like a concept for general concept for the thing, and you back yourself into a concept that is more visual? How do you work that ideas that way?
Yeah, I'm curious to ask you the same thing, but for me, I think it just depends on the project. The one thing, we've lived down here. I mean, it was a collaboration with Claudio, so and it was a music video, and there's no dialogue, so I'm kind of already, you know, speaking in visuals from the beginning. But a mask is such a cliched idea. Those plastic masks you see in every other music. It's like, so from the beginning, the conversations were, how is it not going to be, that kind of mask? How is it going to feel like skin? And we had an amazing prosthetic artist who worked with us. But once the word mask came up, that was the first conversation is, okay, but how is it not going to look like that mask? But that was a collaboration. I mean, Claudio is a real artist. He did Tree Number 3. That's where we met. And I'm sure you know this, but when you meet people, on your creative path, that just you can tell they're not just trying to do the job. They have this artistic pulse that's making them perfect, not for you, not for them, for the art of it, and he was like that. So
that's rare when you do, like, you hold to them dearly, no?
Totally. I have a production designer and a co-writer that, like that, they're so connected to what they're doing, and the passion is so alive, and they have such a specific anyway. So it wasn't like a collaboration because he asked me to do a music video for him. It was like a mutual, let's do something that we both want to do that's cool, and we listen to each other. And so that's how that idea came up. But I do always, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, finish.
I was just going to say the one thing though, however the idea starts, I always make sure that I know what I'm saying emotionally, and that I feel like it's honest. Like that if I go to a party now and say the theme of the movie, I believe it. I'm not saying something I don't fully connect with. So that's what I try to make sure, happens.
I love what you just said. I think that it's really important. And so many times, just because in the process of creating something, it's so hard that you start becoming a problem solver. You disconnect yourself from the feelings that you understand in your body to be true. Like, there's something here. That's the moment when I know I have something.
Exactly. And it's hard too, because we lie to ourselves all the time. So it makes sense that some of our lies that we tell ourselves make it into our first drafts. And you kind of have to take a magnifying glass and say, wait, but is this a lie? Like, is this, and, I think Charlie Kaufman, he has a BAFTA talk, which I really recommend you to listen to if you haven't.
Amazing. I've seen.
He talks about, so good. But he talks about, just the more honest you are, the more someone who's, lonely and feels similar stuff can connect with who you are. I mean, that's why we connect with movies on such a deep level, because they speak our belief system. So we have to be honest. So the mask idea was very emotional for me. It's a very similar theme to Tree Number 3, actually, but a different tone and structure. But it is about being yourself, and the price that you pay for trying to fit in, for trying so hard to fit in. And I guess it's a very rooted thing in me. Yeah.
And also a very, I think, connected theme to immigration and kind of like changing places and starting again and just with a new identity.
Yes, exactly. And I just feel like we all feel like outsiders. It's weird, but it's weird because if we all feel like outsiders, we should feel less of it, because we're all. But it's just a relatable feeling. I think everybody can immediately connect with feeling like they're not enough, like they're trying to belong.
in your work, you have so many different things. You have a clear through line conceptually, but then you go from number three, which is a very character oriented story, very grounded. I mean, of course, with that visual element in the execution, but then the music videos have like this very powerful visual devices. You feel like it feels when I see your work, you have a very broad style. And how do you manage to communicate the story of who you are effectively, knowing that you have so many different things that you're doing?
You know, it's a good question. It's something I'm thinking about a lot right now. I read this book, The Art of Creation. I'm sure you read it with a circle. What's it called?
The Artist Journey.
The Creative Act. Creative Act.
No, I haven't.
And there's a chapter where, there's a chapter they talk about like the filter that we have, right? Like we filter in things that are relevant to us, and everything that doesn't fit our belief system, we throw out. And for a while, I feel like I was really trying to investigate more what I already have, like really hone in on the belief system and watch the movies I love and just rewatch them and study them and examine them. But recently, I'm trying to open the filter a little bit, because I think I'm so focused on what is my theme, what am I trying to say, what is my ultimate voice, that it's actually distracting. And so I'm trying to open the filter a little bit and watch movies that are not my favorite movies, and be inspired by things that don't match my belief system. I'm trying to think why I'm bringing this up, why I was related to your question.
You're saying basically that you don't want to define yourself too much when you are telling the story of who you are, and instead trying to open up to new possibilities and kind of like it sounds like you want to open up to other possibilities of who you are and what story you're telling about yourself.
Exactly. And open up the subconscious, like if I tell myself or others the story of who I am, it can backfire in the creative process. And then, you start limiting yourself. So I really try not to focus on that as much as I can. Yeah. How about you? What do you think about yourself?
Well, actually, I again learned to do two things. Like one thing, I almost split between the story I tell for people of who I am and what my journey was. And I had to learn the hard way coming to LA that you got to create a narrative of yourself, where you just like create this persona that is you. And then this is your journey, like the origin story. And then that's a 30-second thing. And then you have to say, okay, what movies you're interested in doing, blah, blah. You create that phony version of yourself, just as an icebreaker for something. And I really, really work hard on not believing that story and not thinking that's who I actually am. And I think I can see how successful people forced to broadcast that story at a wider scale than mine, they often fall in that trap, and then their work starts to look too much to their previous work maybe in an attempt to repeat past success. And you see how that can backfire. So in the creative process, I try to separate myself of who I am and try to follow my intuitions and where I'm at in this particular moment, right? And then trying to get excited about what's next, and honestly exploring things that are interesting to me. And I'm not successful all the time. Sometimes I fall in the pitfalls of revisiting things because I think they're my things. So I don't want, I'm of course guilty of sometimes falling in that trap as well, but I'm trying to always come out of it as soon as I can in the processes that I'm taking on.
Yeah. And I totally hear that and have, share similar struggles. When people ask my favorite movies, I try and pick two really different movies, like Ratatouille and Synecdoche, New York. And then they're so confused. Like,
I would love to.
So who are you?
I'm like, see you pitching a movie that is like, okay, this movie's Ratatouille meets Synecdoche, New York. That would be a great.
I'd love to do that movie.
That would be a comp that would lose an executive in a second.
Yeah,
well, no, Ratatouille is something that everybody loves in the industry. Synecdoche is a
But
movie that I feel is a tough movie. It's not even for fans like me, Kaufman fans. That is a movie that I loved, but so many people don't connect with.
No, I know. But that is the creative process, is bringing stuff from really different worlds, right? And then suddenly they meet. So you don't want to be like a one note, one note. This is what I do. This is how, you want to be able to bring that surprise. The last thing I'll say is,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No,
I was
please.
just gonna say something interesting that happened to me. So I was saying a week ago, I kind of took a week to just watch a lot of stuff as I'm redoing a project. And it's interesting. Before that week, something I was struggling with, and tell me if this happens to you too, but I was trying to dig into old memories and experiences that I wanted to talk about in this film, but it's almost like I didn't have access. Like I remember the like superficial memory, but I wasn't, my senses weren't connected to it. I wasn't feeling it anymore. And it's almost like it didn't happen, or like it happened really quickly, even if it was a traumatic experience or something that I had a deep connection to. And then I took this week and I would just kind of didn't write, barely wrote that week, and just kind of, and, worked on inputting new stuff and different stuff. And then I was sitting in a coffee shop during the end of this week, again, not writing, actually talking with a friend, and the smell of the pastries inside reminded me of the smell of our living, the lobby of where we lived. Every Sunday they would bring donuts, and it had like the same smell, and I felt that second grade memory. I just thought, wow, it's so crazy. Like it's still there, but it was too cloudy, and I had to take out the cloud, and then I smelled it again.
That's fascinating. And I guess my next question is, how do you articulate that feeling? I feel that's the most, I guess the first challenge is to connect and be present in the process enough that you can connect to your feelings. And then it comes this thing of articulating those abstractions, those feelings into something that is literature or screenwriting. How do you do that?
I know, that's a good question. I don't know if I think I kind of trust the process. What I'm more worried about is, am I feeling it? I think if I'm feeling it, it will translate through to the page. It will come out maybe in a few tries, maybe in scenes I didn't expect, maybe, in a few months from now, or maybe it's already there and now I can see it. But I'm more worried about is that I have to be connected. And that's so hard. Also, back to our previous question, we change too, like a script that you have been writing for 2 years, let's say, maybe your belief system has changed a little bit. So suddenly you're rewriting it. Oh, this is another thing I was going to talk to you about on this call. This is happening now with my short film. So that kind of domino effect of filmmaking. For example, we got a new score. Our composer sent us the first cue, Claudio, and then suddenly, the title card idea I had doesn't really make sense anymore. So we expanded it a little bit, and then once you expand it, you want to change the shot after and before, because the pacing has changed, and then it's just a domino effect. You can change your whole movie so many times. Besides a deadline, which is the simplest answer, how do you know when you're done? Because you want to feel like I've tried everything, but sometimes you just have to be done at some point.
I think a lot about this, and I remember in the process of doing my feature, I got into this rabbit hole of thinking, okay, there may be a permutation of these shots that we shot that perhaps make an amazing movie, and maybe I'm not finding it. And would it be worth exploring all the avenues? Which is it's something of a creative problem that you don't have on set, because your material conditions are so limited that you are on your feet thinking, making decisions intuitively, and just like doing it. And in the process of post-production, I think this can open the door to a neurotic personality like mine, and I'm intuiting like yours as well, and probably part of your talent comes from that. But you gotta, to me, what I remind myself is like, this is just the same as being on set, but in slow motion. I've seen people ruin amazing materials just by overthinking it. I think that it's as important to make quick decisions and intuitive decisions on the post-production process as it is on set. If you start dwelling too much on it, you can start risking not knowing what is good and what is bad and where is south or north, and eventually like losing perspective of the vision. I think that there's you got to be able to connect with your gut feeling and go for it. I think it's a very important element of filmmaking in the post process. I think it's just to not dwell too much on every permutation that is possible. Having said that, when you're talking about ripple effects, well, that's the nature of the whole thing, right? Like one thing leads to another, but you got to know when to stop. Like you got to know when to not go on and on. And I've seen people never finish projects, especially shorts, when they're not an external deadline. And I've seen all sort of pathologies related to this, to the most extreme, where like amazing talent, really creative people that have shot their film. It's not even that they haven't, which is the most common case. They shot it, but they can't get themselves out to put it up. There's always something that is missing and procrastination involved. I think I'm terrified by that. So I think festivals are great as a deadline. Big festivals are great as a deadline, because even if you're not going to get in, if your chances are low, they're great to just say, all right, this is it. I'm putting my stake in the ground.
But I'm more terrified. I mean, I love your answer. Basically, you're saying like, trust your first instinct. And sometimes it's like, how the one cut you didn't touch from all the different versions is actually the best cut in the movie, because you did it and it worked. But because there is that ability to try, like it's not going to hurt to try. Now you're right. If you take forever, it hurts. It ends up hurting you. But what's it gonna take? Just like let's add 4 frames here. Let's add 5 frames. Maybe it is better. Maybe it's not. So it's hard. And then you only find out that you did too much when you don't know anymore. And then you're like, okay, but now. But
I try to play with it. I think if you identify problems and you try to solve them, that's a healthy way to try it. If you are undoing things that work, I think that's not cool, because when you are editing, you're arriving to a vision. And so you have to have a thesis, and you have to confront the elements that you have in front of you against that thesis. And your instinct can tell you this is not quite working. And if it's not quite working, you better work, because like if you feel like something is not going to work, it's not going to work. It's never going to work. Like it could happen that you think things are going to work and they don't. But if you do think they're not going to work in the script, for example, if you feel like, I'm not sure about this scene, if it's working or not, it's probably not going to work.
No.
You're going to find out too late, either on either filming it or editing it.
That's true. That's very true. But yeah, I'm really struggling with that part of like, it works, but what if it could work better? What if you just like playing a little bit more, you could improve it. So it's really hard.
It's hard, but you got to put in some, just be your own boss and tell yourself, set yourself deadlines and expectations. But I mean, I'm not going to meddle with your process, because everything you do is so great. And to close, I want to ask you, what you're excited about right now creatively?
Right now, it's connecting to our last question. I'm excited to lock this cut that we're doing for this new short, where I think I took all the risks possible. It was such an adventure, and I really hope it all pays off, because it's a really different, unique movie for me. So yeah,
I'm so excited to see it and hang out again. And thank you so much for joining me. It's been the most amazing conversation. I'm sure people will enjoy it too. And let's keep talking.
Thank you, Nico. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.